You meet her. She's warm, she's attentive, she's everything the Philippines promised you. She's also got a 3-year-old and a baby daddy who still texts on school nights. And nobody warned you about that part. Dating a single mom anywhere has, let's say, complications. And dating one in the Philippines has complications that are, specifically, legally and culturally layered in ways that won't become obvious until you're already in it. And by then, you're not just involved with her, you're involved with the child, the extended family, the ghost of whoever came before you, and at least one grandmother who has opinions. This video isn't about whether single moms are good people. Most of them are. This is about what you're actually agreeing to when you say yes, and why most foreign men underestimate it almost completely. Hi guys, it's Dee and welcome back to the channel. If you came to the Philippines expecting simple, subscribe because I specialize in explaining exactly why nothing here is simple. You can also find me on Patreon, and channel membership is open if you want to support the channel directly. Today we're going into the single mom situation, the real mechanics of it, the legal exposure, the financial structure, the family dynamics, and the emotional architecture of a relationship that starts with someone else's child already in the room. To start with, I'm gonna tell you that when a Filipino woman has a child, that child is not a background character. The child is a main character. There's a primary relationship, and you are the secondary one. And I'm not criticizing anyone, okay? It's the more like a correct order of priorities for a parent, especially with a guy that they have just met. But a lot of men get into these relationships thinking the child exists in the margins and then feel blindsided when it doesn't. So what this looks like in practice is that plans cancel. Last minute, repeatedly, without much apology to. The kid gets sick, the kid has a school thing, the kid had a nightmare and she's staying home. And if you need consistency to feel secure in a relationship, you're going to spend a lot of this one feeling deprioritized, because you are. And in the Philippines, this is compounded by something that doesn't exist the same way in Western countries. The expectation that everyone participates in raising the child. Her mother, her sisters, her titas, her neighbors, sometimes the barangay. The Filipino family structure is communal by design, and when you date a single mom, you are not entering a contained unit of one woman and one child. You're entering a network, and that network has views on you, on whether you're serious, whether you're spending enough, and whether you have intentions. And before I forget, I also just want to mention that there's this thing in a Filipino culture, or I don't know if it's a Filipino culture or if it's more of like a status thing, that children sleep with their parents until they're teenagers. And as a foreigner, that is very foreign to you, and that's something that you have to know going in. Especially that if that bothers you, that you can't spend time or you can't let alone sleep with a woman you're in a relationship with because there's a child sleeping beside her. The PSA's 2022 census placed female-headed households at roughly 20% of all households in the country, which is higher in urban centers. The Philippines has one of the highest rates of single parenthood in Southeast Asia, and there's no divorce here. There is an annulment, which, by the way, costs anywhere from 300,000 pesos to over 500,000 pesos and takes years. And a significant portion of single mothers in the Philippines are not legally free, especially if they got married. They're separated or abandoned or in limbo, and they're not divorced, they're not fully single, and that distinction matters more than it seems at first. A significant portion of single mothers in the Philippines are not, in any practical day-to-day sense, raising their children. The child is at home, but home is the grandparents' house, okay? Lolo and Lola, or the grandma and the grandpa, are doing school drop off, cooking the meals, handling the fevers, and mom is somewhere else. She's either working in Manila, working in Cebu, working in Qatar on a cruise ship in the Pacific. And the PSA's 2022 survey on overseas Filipinos reported that women make up roughly half of all OFWs, and a disproportionate share of female OFWs are single mothers. The domestic logic is straightforward too. She can't afford to raise the child on local wage. Her parents are willing to step in, and the remittance she sends home covers the household better than her physical presence could. And in Philippine culture, this is not considered abandonment, okay? It's considered a sacrifice. She's working for the child, and that the child is being raised by someone else is treated as a footnote. What this means for you depends on how she's living right now. If she's working far from the child and you're the relationship she's building on the side of that life, understand that the child may be more of an emotional identity than a daily reality. She is a mother in the sense that she sends money and calls on weekends, and not necessarily in the sense of knowing what grade the kid is in or what they had for breakfast. That gap surfaces once the relationship gets serious and proximity to the child becomes a real question. If she's local and the grandparents are the primary caregivers, you're looking at a different dynamic too. One where the grandmother has been running that household long enough that she considers it hers. You're not just meeting a parent at this point, you're meeting the person who has been doing the job. And that woman has authority and she will exercise it. Any arrangement you want to build, like living together, moving, the child schooling, goes through her in practice, even if it nominally goes through your girlfriend. Ask early, where does the child live? Who takes care of them day to day? And when did she last spend more than a week in the same house as her kid? The answers will tell you more about the shape of this relationship than anything she says in the first 3 months. Now let's talk about the baby daddy situation. Because in the Philippines, the biological father has ongoing legal and social standing that doesn't disappear because he's out of the picture emotionally. Under the Family Code of the Philippines, parental authority is shared between both biological parents by default unless a court has specifically modified that, which requires a legal proceeding most people never bother to file. And the man who came before you has legal claim over the child's life regardless of whether he's present, paying support, or even in the country. And he can object to you taking the child anywhere. He can, under certain circumstances, make things legally complicated just by existing. Now, in a lot of cases, and I say a lot, he's completely gone. No contact, no support, no interest. He moved on, started another family, or left the country. And in those situations, he becomes a practical problem, mostly on paper, specifically the travel document issue, which I'll get into a moment, rather than an active presence in your relationship. And some men in this situation are genuinely not a factor at all. But plenty of others are somewhere in between, present enough to cause friction, not present enough to actually co-parent, and he may still show up to, the child's birthday. He may still be in the family group chat. Filipino culture does not cleanly sever ties the way Western breakup culture attempts to. We're done here often means we are no longer romantic, but we are permanently connected through this child and both extended families. You are entering a relationship with a prior attachment that has structural permanence even when the man himself has checked out. And under Republic Act 9262, the Anti-Violence Against Women and Their Children Act, the definition of psychological violence is broad enough that conflicts involving you, the mother, and anyone in her circle can escalate in ways you didn't anticipate. This law is real, it applies to both foreign nationals and locals, and it is occasionally used as leverage in relationship disputes. Not to scare you, okay? I'm not scaring you at all. Just so you know it exists before you need to know it exists. Now let's talk about what the law says about you and that child. Republic Act 7610 is the Special Protection of Child or Children Against Abuse, Exploitation, and Discrimination Act. It is broadly written and taken seriously when foreign nationals are involved, particularly at airports, hotels, and immigration checkpoints. Now, if you want to take your girlfriend and her child on a trip, like a domestic flight to Cebu, a weekend in Boracay, you need a notarized travel clearance from both biological parents authorizing that child to travel with you. If the other parent is still involved, you know. If the biological father is absent or uncontactable, that becomes your problem to solve before the trip and not at the check-in counter. Filipino airports like in Naiya, Mactan, Iloilo do flag foreign men traveling with Filipino minors who aren't documented legal dependents. But this actually, I think, more happens if they're only traveling with a kid and the mom is not present. Immigration officers are trained to screen for child trafficking indicators. You know, I'm dating her mom is not a document. Again, as long as the mom is there, the risk is not really that high, and, you know, the enforcement here in the Philippines. Again, that said, enforcement in the Philippines is not uniform. A lot of couples navigate these situations without incident, especially domestically, especially outside major airports. And the law exists and the risk is real, but this isn't a situation where you will be automatically pulled aside every time you leave the house with a child in tow. The point is to know it's there so you can manage it and not to live in fear of it. And if you're thinking about cohabitation, you're now a foreign adult male living in a home with a minor who isn't your child. And in a barangay context, this is noticed and talked about. And in a worst case scenario, I'm emphasizing worst case, a bad breakup, a hostile biological father, someone in the network who decides to make trouble, your presence in that home becomes a vulnerability. And one legal consultation before you move in costs significantly less than a situation that goes sideways. There is an emotional architecture to being with someone who has already built a life before you arrived, and it is heavier than most men account for. Filipino single mothers, particularly those who are left or abandoned, carry a specific kind of grief. It's the grief of a broken family in a culture where family is sacred. And the Catholic Church doesn't soften that. You know, the family doesn't soften it either. She has almost certainly been shamed, pressured, or pitied. She may not show you this directly. She'll show it in how she responds to conflict, in how she tests your consistency, in how quickly she becomes dependent, or alternatively, in how hard she works to need nothing from you at all. If she bonds you to the child, and she probably will, because that's what's happening in cohabiting relationships, kids attach, and then, you know, the relationship ends, and you're leaving a situation with a grief component for a child who did nothing wrong. Filipino children in single parent households already have some version of attachment disruption in their background, and another departure doesn't land neutrally. The piece very few men are honest with themselves about: most foreign men who come to the Philippines are not looking for a ready made family. They want a fresh start, you know, or a simpler life, or a companion who isn't carrying the weight of their own history. A single mom is, by definition, not a blank slate. She has a life that predates you and continues regardless of what you do. And that doesn't really make her a bad choice in this kind of sense. It makes her a specific one. Now let's talk about the financial math, because with a single mother, there is already a financial baseline before you arrive, which is a child. School fees, uniforms, health center visits, vitamins, milk, clothes, they outgrow every 6 months. These are not discretionary expenses either, they are the cost of the child existing. And once you're visibly in the picture, once you've met the family, shown up to a birthday, been introduced, the assumption calculus shifts. Now, in my opinion, this isn't predatory if you really look closely. It's more structural. You know, in the Filipino family system, a partner, especially a foreign one, is assumed to have resources, and resources are shared among couples here. The question isn't whether you'll be expected to contribute to the child's expenses. The question is how quickly and how explicitly that expectation surfaces. What makes this different from standard relationship financial dynamics here is that the child's needs are non-negotiable. If it comes down to the relationship or the school fees, she will choose the school fees every time. If the financial side of your relationship becomes strained, the first thing that gets cut is you, because the child cannot be cut. But I'm not saying this is gonna be done by all single moms out there. And if they don't do that, if they do, decide the other way, that is your decision to assess what happens. Some men are genuinely completely fine with this, and some genuinely want to build a family. And this is the natural cost of entry, but a significant number of foreign men end up in these relationships without understanding that the financial dimension is preloaded in a way a childless relationship isn't. And here's what I also want to say, because it would be dishonest not to. I know a lot of single mothers in the Philippines, good ones, women who are doing an extraordinary job under circumstances that weren't fair to begin with. And I know relationships between foreign men and single Filipino mothers that genuinely worked, where the man walked in clear-eyed, the woman was honest about her situation, the child got stability, and everyone came out better for it. And those relationships exist, and they're not rare, I promise. The foreign man who does well in this situation is usually the one who actually wanted a family, not just a partner, the one who understood that the child is part of the deal and chose that consciously rather than tolerating it reluctantly. Kids in these situations are perceptive. They know the difference between someone who is there for their mom and someone who is there for them too. So this video is not a verdict on single mothers or the men who date them. It's a map of the terrain so you can make a real decision instead of a romantic one. The men who struggle in these relationships almost always say the same thing afterward. Not that she was wrong for them, but that they didn't understand what they were getting into until it was too late to approach it differently. Go in knowing. That's the whole point. And I'm not saying that all single mothers are angels too. There are single mothers that would take advantage of you. And you're a grown man and you should see through that kind of things. The Philippines will give you a lot of things. Easy warmth, genuine connection, a pace of life that feels like you can breathe again. It will also give you complexity in every relationship type, every family structure, every situation you think you understand until you actually live it. Single moms here aren't a bad category, but they are a specific situation with specific weight, and the men who do best with it are the ones who walked in knowing what it was, not the ones who figured it out after the child had already started calling them daddy. If this is the kind of thing nobody tells you before you arrive, you know where to find me. That's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. This has been Dee, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye! And culturally... Last minute, pitied. She has almost certain... named, pressured, or PT. These are not discriminatory.